Hi everybody, I'm Liz Larson with Transform One Idea, where we're always exploring the idea that the smallest shift can create the biggest change. And today I'm here with a real change maker, Tom Gebo with YTE, and he also happens to be a second grade teacher. So what other titles do you have, Tom?
I'm a director because YTE is Youth Theater Ensemble.
Okay.
And we do a 2-week musical theater camp for kids. And this year, after you talked to me about the Cognoballs, we used them to help focus the kids.
So I really want you to share about how you used it in camp, but I want to back up a little bit so anybody watching can kind of get an idea of how we got here.
Okay.
Because this actually developed between the two of us,
Right.
using it in the camp and the way we used it, because the process that you used was invented on the spot for you.
Right.
So, and then developed before the camp happened. So,
Well, and initially you had come to me about focusing kids for testing. That's what you wanted to talk about. And I thought that in the schools nowadays, the focus would do better for regulation, because there's a lot of kids that can't make it through the day of school without breaking down or causing a ruckus in class, which disturbs everybody. And that's typical throughout the world. That's going on right now. And when you talk to me about the Cognoballs and how easy it is to use and how it brings the brain, the size of the brain together, you and I started talking about how it could be used in my classroom, in my second grade classroom. And when we talked, it was at the end of the school year. And we talked about using it, which is coming up next week in second grade. But before that, I was doing a musical theater camp with kids of the age range to 7 to 14, plus high schoolers that are apprentices. And we thought maybe if we use the Cognoballs at the beginning of camp every day and at the beginning of lunch when they come back, after lunch, when they come back from lunch, how would that change their focus? And so we did it. We did it for the 2 weeks of camp, and I think the results were amazing.
yeah, and I'll show you guys how it actually looked when they did it. But it was so interesting to me. I really did think, well, I remember years ago, because my daughter was in your class,
Right.
2 different times, 2 different years, right? What years? First and third grade, or third and fifth grade?
Third and fifth.
Third and fifth. And I knew that you had used so many tools with the kids already. Music in the morning as an anchor.
Mm-hmm.
That at least for the kids that I saw, they loved that.
Right.
And it introduced them to a genre of music that they may have never been introduced to. The Beatles and Queen and who else?
Well, ELO and you name it, all those 70s, 80s, and 90s bands are all in my classroom. It also, like you said, gives them an anchor, but it gives them a reason to come in the door.
Yeah, exciting to come and get to hear this kind of upbeat, cool music.
And to get started.
And they know when they walk in the room, they're going to have that upliftment.
Right.
But it's also an anchor, like you said, to
Right.
walk in the room. And so I knew that about you already, that there were many, many of these things that I'd like to say are compassionate teaching that you use with kids. And so I thought that this might be something you could use, because I remember back in the day,
Right.
it was all about teaching to the test. That had started
Right.
when my daughter was in school. And I remember you saying you just didn't love that,
No.
So when we spoke, I was surprised. In fact, you had to keep correcting me about it. Because I kept thinking, behavior issues, this or that, but you kept saying the word trauma.
Trauma, yes.
So would you share a little bit more about that from your perspective as an educator, what you're seeing?
I have to start with my perspective as a person,
Yeah.
because I was raised in an alcoholic family, and so there was trauma involved in my life. And so coming into teaching, my goal was to make it fun to learn, and to also have a relationship with each and every child. And as my career has gone on, that's grown in every single school. Relationships are very important nowadays. But what we're seeing is there's a lot of trauma from people that are poor, and there's trauma from people's lives before that is carried over to the children, and the children are experiencing the trauma as well. It's passed on. The trauma is passed on. And so we're getting a lot of children that are in trauma in one way or another, and dealing with helping them, not be up here all the time, which is, in fight or flight, because a lot of the time that's where they are. We want them to bring down to their center, to their brain core, where they can think.
Would you tell about that hand movement that you just used?
This means that you're at a thinking spot in your brain. You can think, you can talk, you can converse, but as you get angrier or excited or full of anxiety, you go up here, and everything is like an animal, like fight or flight. You're running, you're screaming, right. You want to get out of wherever you are. So the goal is to teach the kids to come back to here so they can learn. And everyone's looking for ways to bring the kids back to this. And when we discussed the Cognoballs and how it actually brings the two sides of your the brain together, that helps the kids come to here when the two sides are like this. When the two sides are together, and this helps them pull back, at least from my experience, what I've seen in a limited time that I've used it, not only on the kids in camp, but also myself, because I'm using it for myself. It brings me back to my thinking brain instead of my fight or flight, because I go there too, just like we all do.
So I actually want to bring you back to something that you said about the kids, having trauma, coming to school with trauma, having trauma in the past. Sometimes it's just trauma in the morning about what socks to wear. What if the t-shirt doesn't work, or if mom doesn't want you to go to school in your pajamas that day,
And you and I were talking about that yesterday over coffee, about just the daily trauma.
Yeah, little stuff.
Is a hard thing for, especially little kids to come to school. And then the older kids, because of peer pressure, they have this or that or whatever, and how does my hair look, and I can't go to school because I have a pimple or whatever. There's trauma every day. But the trauma I'm talking about is the trauma that blows up a classroom.
Yeah, that's what we're really, what we were really talking about when we were talking about using the ball in the classroom. One last thing on that subject is, what struck me and what has really been in my field and I've been thinking about so much is the trauma that teachers are experiencing.
Yes.
Kids come to school, they have so many problems, and you're the one who is tasked with managing that, at least for the hours that the kids are in school and for the months that they're in school.
Right.
So that's something we talked about for the ball. A possibility for the ball is the teachers being able to take that minute or so and reset. Right,
for themselves. And then you just gave me an idea. I'm going to talk to my principal, Nevin, because we have a retreat on Tuesday. And I think I'm going to introduce it to the staff and see if we can do it as a group and see how that works.
That'd be amazing.
It'll be a nice thing to just see so people can get an idea, and then talk about what I'm going to be doing in my class with it, and how I've learned what happened in camp with it.
Yeah.
And talking about experimenting with the Cognoballs to see if it actually does help, because even a lot of the times the kid in the class who blows up the class ends up leaving because they have to.
Yeah.
Or if they don't leave, then the whole class has to leave because it's just disturbing. And so you and I had talked about the fact that once that child leaves, and in a perfect world, that child would go in with the person in the learning center and work with the Cognoball in a perfect world. But if that's not existing yet, because it's a new thing, I can, when that child leaves, I can get my class to come back and regulate themselves, because it's very anxiety filled when something like that happens, even for the best kids.
Yeah, for everyone.
When someone is melting down like that, you all feel it, and so that when that child leaves, as a classroom, we could do it. I plan on introducing it to my class the second week, and start with small groups. And then, like we did in camp, we start initially in camp. I tried doing the whole group, and it did not work, not initially. So we had 4 groups anyway, so we just did it by group, and that really worked. And then we broke them into 2 groups, And that worked. And eventually we had 60 kids doing it in a circle for a minute, passing the balls, saying the colors, holding on to the balls. And they were all seated, and eventually we got them standing up to do it. And there's other things. I mean, you can graduate, like you and I talked about, high, low, and we didn't get to those in camp, but isn't in a school year, you're going to be able to get to it.
Well, I want to share with everybody else too. We're kind of sharing some inside knowledge that maybe everybody else doesn't know, but the Cogno ball has the system that you use. It's not just a ball, but the system that you use of passing it back and forth. The auditory, the kinesthetic, and the visual are all engaged. The cross-body movement harmonizes both sides of the brain, and then we use visual eye accessing cues. And what that really does is it has the ability to delete a file that's existing in the body. So when Tom's talking about a kid, having a meltdown in class and everybody else feels that, we were talking about needing a way to change that, to shift their state, to bring them back, and for them also not to carry that with them for the rest of the day.
Right.
And so using this tool, first of all, there's the distraction of the movement. There's second, physical movement. We know that helps with fight or flight.
Yep.
And then there is the combination of the eye accessing cues, the movements, calling out the color, the brain's noticing color, it's noticing shape. All of that has the ability to just simply remove the physical sensation of that trauma.
And that trauma, even though the trauma of the child melting down in class, they have trauma of their own, that trauma of melting down adds trauma to the kids in the class.
To everything. Yeah, then there's the embarrassment of having a meltdown. And you said something to me that I thought was so insightful. You said that the rest of the kids are feeling what that child is feeling. So on so many levels, they are, sort of empathically in a way feeling sorry for that child maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're angry at the child for messing things up. Maybe they're frightened. I would imagine a big part of the time they're frightened.
Yes.
And so now you've got all these emotions that get in the way of learning, which is what they're supposed to be there to do.
Right.
So we were talking about the idea, if we could eliminate that, change just the state in the classroom, you might be able to get back on with class and have a good day.
And it'd be because you eventually get back onto it without this, but it takes a lot of work. And if this makes it simpler and quicker, it resets everything because of the bringing the two sides of the brain together and the distraction and the colors and the shapes. More power to it. I mean, because then we're getting more time in the day to teach, and we're having more fun instead of having to deal with this trauma.
And what I love about the idea is we're not adding trauma. We're not giving them something. That trauma for that day doesn't add to their overall trauma because we kind of just dissolved it.
Right.
We moved the fight or flight, the adrenaline, the stress, we move it out of their system.
Right.
If nothing else, just the physical movements.
Right.
All the rest of it just adds on to that, just helps. And what's lovely, what I like about it, is for kids, it's playing with a ball. It's noticing a color or a shape.
Or a shape, or both.
Yeah. It's getting a chance to get up and move and not have to sit still and pretend like nothing just happened.
Right.
That is now hurting me. It's hurting my body. It's hurting my soul in a way. Very compassionate children.
Yeah.
Like my daughter was. I know that she would have taken that on and brought it home and suffered about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had kids in my class because we had a child that melted down all the time, and they needed a hug right after it was done. They needed to be held because it hurt. It scared them. It was not a good thing. Yeah, and the other children, even though they were, okay, we're used to this, it happens all the time, that they're feeling some kind of trauma. And if we could take a minute with the balls, it's a minute of passing it around together and seeing colors and then passing it the other way for a minute, I think it would reset. It's like resetting back to, you said it negates that that moment. It's like it gets rid of that moment because you're realigning everything. If that's true, and from what I've seen, it is. What a tool!
What a tool! So let's share with everybody how we figured it out and what the tool actually is, and you guys will get to see a short clip of the kids actually doing it. But what we were concerned about is, okay, normally the Cogno ball is used alone against a wall or between two people.
Right.
And so we were saying, okay, we know that it sounds like it would be an amazing tool for the classroom, but you can't stop and do the ball with 30 kids, right?
Right.
So we started thinking about that and talking about that, and it dawned on me that the crossbody movement could be used side to side, passing the ball. So that was the first layer. What if we used it in a group? We call out the color as we pass it. As long as the eyes are moving and we're crossbody, we're in good shape.
And you're holding it on two hands.
Holding it two hands, yeah. So we get that movement that we need. And then what if we did it both ways? Okay, yeah. We hit all the points that we needed for the Cogno ball to work the way it's supposed to.
Right.
So that was the first idea. Then we realized we could use it from low to high with accessing cues as well, sitting, standing.
Right.
So now there's multiple ways that it can be used, and you were the first one to really do it in real life in the theater camp.
Well, and it was I found out that it was a progression.
Yeah.
You couldn't start with the whole group. You had to get the kids in small groups first so that they knew the process and how it worked. And once the process was ingrained, they knew what they were supposed to be doing, you could make the groups bigger. I think it was more effective in smaller groups, but it does work with a bigger group. We had it with 60 kids and it worked. In a classroom, you have 23 to 30 kids. I think that would be perfect.
Yeah. So tell us about the theater camp. So it's 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
With a break in the middle of a weekend.
Just the weekend,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
The kids are learning a script and music and choreography.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Of a small musical, about 35 minutes long.
About 35 minutes long, 7 to 14-year-olds.
Right.
With apprentices that are slightly older than that, 14 to maybe 18?
Well, 17.
14
because,
to 17.
We take kids that have been through camp, and once they're too old for camp, then they become apprentices. And we need the high schoolers, they're apprentices, because they help move the kids from space to space. The kids look up to them. They take care. The high schoolers take care of the kids, and we're pretty picky about who we choose for our high school kids. They have to be responsible. And Jamie and I, my administrator for the camp, were talking about how those kids that have gone through camp and then apprentices are goal-oriented.
Yeah.
Very goal-oriented.
Yeah.
And you can see in their future, after they've graduated and grown up, they've gone on to being productive citizens.
We're actually going to have a whole another conversation about that whole thing about how theater camp makes a difference in a whole life.
Right.
And so with what's going on, it sounds like there's a lot going on. Scripts, movement, 60 kids, apprentices, staff, things to learn, things to know, right? So a lot can go.
And then putting it all together.
Yeah.
Because you have its own separate places, just like you do in every theater experience. And then it eventually everybody learns everything and it comes together into one show.
Yeah. So the idea was that we had this perfect testing ground to use the ball in groups.
Right.
And to see what happens, because we really didn't know. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So your idea was that you would use it in the morning when kids arrived and after lunch.
Right.
And so you've done this for 15 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your experience was that you had a period of time where you needed to get kids back in, kind of in line.
Refocus them, so that they can learn what they need to learn and they're not bouncing all over the place. Kids are going to be bouncing, and we were hoping that this would get them focused in the morning And then after they go to lunch, and they're running around and eating lunch and playing with their friends, and then it brought them back for rehearsal in the afternoon.
So when in camp before this, not this time, but the time before, how long do you think it normally took to like get everybody settled, get their attention?
15 minutes.
About 15 minutes.
15 to 20 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. So,
Yeah.
you know, you're trying to direct people, get people where they need to be.
And it's frenetic. Whereas we did in the morning and just after lunch, they would sit in their circles and they would go to the left for 1 minute, then go to the right for 1 minute, and then we'd have another short warm-up, a physical type of warm-up, and we were done in 7 minutes.
So you saved half the time.
Right, yes.
So, but here's another thing, I witnessed it, and when we videotaped it, you'll all get to see some of it, that time then appeared to me, and I have seen it before, my daughter was in the camp, I helped with the camp for years, it appeared to me to be highly constructive time.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, wow, that 7 minutes, even though it's half the time, look like we're focusing. Well, we know for sure that we're also getting the brain lined up.
Right.
We're getting all of our learning senses activated.
Right.
You know, auditory, kinesthetic, and visual. That's the way three of the ways that people learn. So I was watching thinking, that's pretty incredible, because these kids are not just doing a physical activity that focuses them, but we're getting their brain and body ready to learn.
Right.
Did that?
Well, and I have to say that I thought about it after. I mean, I was really, I was interested in the process of how it was going to work, and our camp is process oriented anyway.
Yeah.
It's the process, and just to see the difference. I mean, it seemed like we had my friend Evan Van Manen came to see the show. He used to be involved in. His comment was, it was different. It was. We've done this show a couple times, and it seemed more focused. He said they were really singing. I mean, they sang, and he thought it was because we're having a younger camp now, and the kids really want to please, and you don't have the older kids who are 12, 13, 14. But we had those kids, and I can't help but thinking that focusing and pulling the brain together and awakening the learning centers helped. I think it helped.
It seemed like it could have.
It did, yeah.
Well, and so on the first day, it was a little chaotic.
Right. Well, I tried to do a full group the first day too, yes.
So would it be your recommendation for somebody who's trying to do it with 60 people to do it in small groups first?
Just to get everybody on the same page so they know what's going on and how it works, and just the logistics.
And there's a learning curve, right?
Yep.
People have to learn how to use it, and what are we supposed to do?
Right.
So you have to do both hands.
Right.
So that was one of the things. People wanted to pass with one hand.
And they wanted to go.
Yeah, and they didn't want to follow with their eyes. So, there was some prompting. Both eyes, both hands.
And I got so nervous for a while because not all the kids were doing that.
Yeah.
And I had to let that go. I had to just close my eyes and let them do what they're doing. Eventually, either they come around to doing it the correct way or they don't. But that's okay. It's part of the process. It's part of eventually, I think once they see everybody else is serious about it, that they're going to start getting serious about it. So
one of the things I noticed, because as I was filming, many of the sessions, I would get a little nervous too, because I saw somebody who their eyes weren't following, and I wanted to jump in and say, oh, makeup. But then I thought, wait a minute, that child is relatively quietly passing a ball.
Right.
You know what? They were still engaged.
Right.
There was still a bit of physical movement. So in the videos that you'll see, the kids are sitting, but eventually you did have them stand.
We had them stand, yes.
And what was your experience with that level, the next level?
I just thought it was the natural level to go to. And then camp ran out, and we didn't, and so we couldn't continue, but I would have loved to have been able to do from the lower level to the higher level that we part. Pass down low, up high, low, high. And then that even activates more learning centers in the brain.
Yeah. So there's something I haven't asked you about, because we've talked some off camera, but in every situation you have your outliers. You have your one or two kids who, they are theater pros, and they're there to be professional and learn their lines and their series. And then you have your kids that are kind of scrambling around and busy, and they're just there for the fun of it, which is a part.
Right.
So was there anything at all that you noticed about your outliers this year?
I just in general, everyone was more focused. That's what I saw. We had one little boy that had ADHD and Asperger's, and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
He couldn't, and he wouldn't be able to sit and do the balls.
Yeah.
He could not do it in the big group. Now, if someone would have sat with him and done it one-on-one, I think it would have been a different story. But everybody else, even kids that had trouble in school, another little boy who was in my school and had trouble, he was focused. He was like, he loved it. He was there and he did everything that he was supposed to do. He didn't rebel and sit in the corner and do the stuff that he used to do at school.
Oh, wow.
He was part of the whole thing. And some of that could have been the musical theater environment.
Sure.
But I think that also the working with the brain stuff, very little that we did, only at the beginning of the day and at the after lunch, helped him focus.
And I think that's really wise, to be realistic and honest about who it can work for and who it may not.
Right.
And with that little boy, we talked about that, the one that couldn't do it.
Right.
There's a lot of stimulation there.
Oh, yeah.
For a kid like that, it might need to be a one-on-one or even a more quiet of rolling the ball back and forth. And that's,
at least to begin with.
Yeah, and that's yet to be seen. Maybe it would have been a possibility to do that with him and then integrate him into the group.
Right. And that's what I think. And eventually, I'm hoping that's the way it's going to work in an elementary school environment with these kids that can't do it in the group would go and work with an individual. And eventually, because of that work, they may be able to join the group. But you said from the beginning, we're the first people to use it in a group at all. And it's mostly to be for one-on-one. And that's really good for these traumatized kids that blow up a classroom. And you could go and do this for 3 minutes. And then they're able to go back to class.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh, yeah.
And I really love the idea that what we're talking about here is not just help for the kid who's had the meltdown. They need help, that's obvious. And they're probably the one who's going to get the most help.
Right.
But everybody else is going to get the help now too.
Right, because of what we've come up with this group thing.
Yeah. So, as the world's leading expert at the moment in the Cogno Circle system, what tips would you have for somebody else who wants to try this, either in a classroom or with a group or even with adults?
I think that you need to tell the rules. You have to do both hands on the ball and follow it as you pass. Even when you're passing it back and forth with the person, you have to follow and say everything out loud. You have to say it out loud because that activates part of your brain. But the other thing is to let go of the perfection of it, because I had trouble with that.
Yeah.
I was getting upset because some of the kids weren't doing it the way they were supposed to. And then I just had to let that go. And once I did, I felt better about it.
Yeah.
And it was smoother.
Yeah.
For everybody. And even though there was kids passing it, like there were other kids that were like doing it the correct way and getting the full benefit. And like you said, even these kids are getting some benefit.
Something, yeah.
Yeah. And so you just have to let that go. And you have to try to eventually, when they're done, remind them you have to hold on to it, with both hands, and you have to follow it. In a place like my classroom, that would be easier to monitor.
Yeah.
Be easier to bring about, to get everybody to do it the correct way. With 60 kids and in a musical theater camp, it was difficult.
Yeah.
And you had all different ages of kids. And that's amazing that it worked with all different ages of kids. And the apprentices sat in and participated. So the high schoolers were doing it as well. And they were more focused this year. Which was...
And there's something we don't know, we don't necessarily have a way to measure. Is that we had kids who were twice a day using a Cogno system that's meant to align and harmonize both sides of their brain and activate all their learning centers. So what we don't know is what might happen in school this year.
Right.
That would be very interesting to know, but we really don't have a way to follow. Unless we get some reports back from parents, which could be, could be interesting.
My plan is to do it at the beginning of the day and to do it after lunch. After lunch, to bring everybody back. And that's the initial situation. And then slowly introduce it if we have definitely if we have a meltdown, there would be another time to do that. Also, we talked about my Talk It Out chairs, and Leah remembers the Talk It Out chairs, where people come in and they have a problem, they can't tattle, there's no tattling, you have to go to the Talk It Out chairs. And the person that has the problem says, I didn't like it when you, and the person that caused the problem or was part of the problem would say, they would repeat it, you didn't like it when I, and so that creates empathy. And then then it starts a discussion. What you and I discussed yesterday was after they do that Talk It Out chairs, maybe for a minute, they pass the ball and they realign themselves and they get themselves situated and they reactivate their learning centers and then they leave.
I think it's a fantastic idea. And what we were talking about yesterday is too that sometimes even when you talk it out, when you've had a tiff with somebody, you still carry it with you.
After you shake hands and walked away.
You still have a little hurt in your heart, maybe you feel it.
Right.
If we had the opportunity, and that's all these are, is opportunities to make a change, to eliminate that, so they really do walk away fresh. That would be amazing.
Oh yeah, and I think just getting them to talk about it is amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Huge.
Get the second graders to sit down and talk and not tattle and try to get everybody to fix their problem. They need to be able to fix it themselves using words, not fists or hitting whatever. But then to add this to realign them and to make them feel better about what just happened, that would be
It'd be phenomenal. Phenomenal. Jinx. Well, I think, what you're doing with the Talk It Out chairs, anyway, we talked about this. There's so many tools that you have as a teacher and you're using that are incredible. And we hope to share that with people too. Is that these kids are learning a way to communicate.
Right.
Most kids don't have that opportunity. I'm mad at you, you're mad at me, and then we're not friends for the rest of the year. Or maybe the rest of the time we go to school together.
Right.
They're learning it's okay to have a disagreement and have tools for actually talking it out.
And maybe not fixing it, but making it a little bit better.
Yeah, a little bit understanding, having understanding between the two of us.
Empathy.
Yeah, empathy. And then adding the ball might be great just to eliminate that sense in the physical body of hurt.
And bring their learning back.
Exactly. So it'll be very interesting this year, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again about what you've discovered.
And I hope you'll come into my class and film.
Absolutely, we'll film. But, I'm curious about too, we've talked a lot about trauma. We've talked a lot about eliminating hurt feelings or upset. But what we don't know is doing that daily, what will it do to test scores? What will it do to children who have trauma initially? Maybe there won't be so many meltdowns. We really don't know, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Well, in second grade, we don't do a lot of testing.
Oh, you don't?
No, but we do. There's a math test that they take initially, and then they work on what they need to work on, and then they take it in the middle of the year, and they take it at the end of the year. So that'd be interesting to see how that improves. And dibbles, where they read for a minute.
Yeah.
And they do that beginning, middle, and end. And it'd be interesting to see how that improves.
Yeah.
Just to, even if we knew we're going to be having a dibbles test, we know they're coming at 9:30 to get the kids, and so we take a minute to realign and get our learning ready, and then another minute to go the other way, and let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Well, I am so appreciative, and I know Bill McKenna, our founder, is so appreciative of you being willing to test this, being willing to see what is possible, and having tested it already. There's so much more information now and usability for other people who want to try it in the future. So, you have anything else you want to add at this point?
Just, I'm still exploring, just like you are.
We're exploring.
And I'm really excited to see what happens. My principal is using me as a testing ground.
Yeah.
And I know my staff, which is incredible, will be very interested in something that can help regulate and refocus and bring the learning back. And if it's as easy as something as this, they don't have to spend 45 minutes to teach something, and you learn it quickly, and you can do it for 3 minutes or 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes after lunch, or when you need it to refocus your class. They'll be all over it.
Well, and in camp it was 1 minute.
Right.
1 minute one way and 1 minute the other way.
So 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes after lunch.
Yeah, and one other thing about that I noticed, by about day 3, they were really getting the hang of it.
Yeah.
And after that I noticed, it was this little almost meditation, this quiet. I even noticed that your comments to the kids, your direction, was soft, and they were hearing, and I mean, you could almost drop a pin. Well, you could hear the kids passing the ball and saying the colors, but it was quietly. Like, that is incredible for 60 kids playing with a ball quietly.
Well, and they've come from their houses after breakfast, and they're running in, and we got to start camp, and then they ate lunch, and they ran around with their friends, and they had a break, and now that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, and it looked amazing. I'm so grateful to have witnessed it. So I just want to thank you again so much. And I'm sure people will want to hear back from you from what happened, and you know, if you've made progress, and also what the hang-ups are. You know, what can people look out for? How do we improve even further? You know, so. All right, thanks so much, Tom. Again, this is Liz Larson with Transform One Idea and the Cognomovement System. You can find me at transform1, the word one, idea.com, and Cognomovement at the word cogno, C-O-G-N-O, and the word movement.com. You can see videos. You'll see some more videos of the kids and other processes that we're using the ball with. Thanks so much for watching, and please reach out to us if you have any questions.